So Absolute Catwoman #1 is the origin for Selina Kyle in the Absolute universe, more than what we saw in Absolute Batman, and Che Grayson knocks it out of the park. So what this does, and we're technically doing the comic out of order, this starts in Gotham City 12 years ago, and it picks up with Selina Kyle basically in a foster home, where the foster father, Joe, comes running in, basically screaming at her, right? Like, I'm gonna kill you, that kind of thing. She just like goes to jump out the window, he chases her, and you find out that she's been skimming his debit card, literally pulling money off of it. And she says, right, not me, sorry, you must have misplaced it, Joe. And then when he looks at her wrist, he says, that's the bracelet I bought for Maureen, you little thief. So ever since she was young, we realize she's been stealing. But the motivations behind it are actually very interesting here, because she responds and she says, consider it a birthday present for your favorite foster daughter. And that's where Joe says, the state doesn't pay me enough to take care of trash like you. I should just let you fall and have sanitation clean you off the sidewalk tomorrow. No one will even notice that you're gone. But her response, but I bet you'll miss those foster care checks that you cash every month. We both know you use it to pay off your gambling debts to the Falcons. Now back off. And she ultimately ends up taking off. Now, here's a funny thing. There is a kind of monologue that tracks her throughout the entirety of the story. This section of it actually just kind of focuses on the origin itself, so doesn't really make things confusing at all. She simply just says, I don't even want the bracelet. I just took it to flip. Anything, any tiny thing I can put away to help me get up and away from this place, to get too high up for men like Joe to put their hands on me ever again. I came here from Cuba when I was just a baby. I don't remember much, but I'll never forget the feeling of being weightless, sailing 93 miles from shore to shore. I could hear the heartbeat of the person who held me, their face blotted out by the sun. The postcard that I told you about, which she references earlier in the story, is the only thing I have from home. It shows a palisade in the Sierra mountain range 1,000 feet above the ocean. At the cliff's edge is a woman dressed in white. Trees are around her and the seas below her, suspended between the sky and the water. Now, this is a beautiful description of the motivation of Selina. And so what this does is it picks up a couple years later. Now, we know from Absolute Batman that Selina Kyle had struggled with homelessness. Essentially, that was kind of a core part of her character, a girl surviving on the streets and doing what she could. When she's sitting on a rooftop in Gotham, there's this girl who comes climbing up over the ledge, and she just says, hey, you didn't see me, okay? And she's like, where's an escape spot? And that's where Selina Kyle just points to the fireplace over there. And this girl's just like, I owe you. And so that's where Selina says, I found out afterwards that the cops had chased her all the way from Central Booking, something about smuggling in a 3D printed screwdriver for her mom in lockup, which is actually kind of genius when you think about it. Metal detectors aren't going to pick that up. And that's where the cops show up and they say, hey, that girl took my freaking handcuffs. And they call out to Selina and they ask her, did you see some girl come up this way? And Selina's like, I mean, unless she's a cat, no, I didn't really see anything. And so she says to herself, right, Holly was a smartass, yeah, but she was also plain smart. So the cops end up leaving. Now, of course, Holly comes out because she'd been hiding the whole time and just says thanks, right? You know, and Selina's like, hey, don't mention it. And she asks, right, can I stay here for a little while longer, right? Basically lay low until the one time takes off. And Selina's just kind of like, hey, look, I mean, it's a free country, do your own thing. But they start forming essentially a friendship here because Selina's cat takes a liking to Holly. And Holly's just kind of like, so what's his name? And Selina says, King Rupert, right? And Holly's like, very regal. That's a very regal cat name, right? But it's cool to see them exchange back and forth and basically build a rapport pretty quickly because they're essentially on the lam, two different reasons, but they're on the lam just trying to survive out there in the world. And so Holly says, I think his name is fitting. People in ancient Egypt worshipped cats after all. And Selina's like, yeah, and I don't think cats ever forgot that, which they definitely didn't. And so of course she introduces herself, right? I'm Selina. Holly says, I'm Holly. And the cool thing is Selina says Holly was just like me, a loner, a thief, a girl with no home and a grudge. And for a while, I thought that maybe I didn't have to be alone. And so that's where Holly reveals the fact that she has a black eye. So clearly she comes from an abusive background. And so while they talk a little bit more, right, that Selina asks, so tell me those cops didn't chase you all the way over here over a cake. And Holly's just kind of like, not exactly. And then she looks at Selina and asks, do you want to know a secret? And we don't find out what the secret is right off the bat. Instead, we end up switching back to Selina when she's in London, and you get this really cool monologue, which is technically where the comic begins. And she says, it's the thrill, right? Admit it. The tingle that you get when you're picking your target, the stakeout, the anticipation, the purr of the suit as you slip it on. It's the knowledge that you are the best, the only one who can get the thing. The 60-carat pink star diamond sealed away in a mountain fortress in the Alps, or the superconducting quantum processor hidden on a gigayacht currently crossing the Arabian Sea. Doing anything to get your hand on that shiny new thing. But that is not me. And it turns out that this Catwoman slinking through this house in London, that's not Selina. Instead, Selina sprays that Catwoman down with tranquilizer darts and says, none of that stuff, the money and all the riches and all that kind of stuff, none of that matters to me. My name is Selina Kyle. I'm Catwoman. Looking down at you is like looking into a funhouse mirror. The image is there, but the proportions are all wrong. Right now, the opioid from the tranquilizer dart is working its way through your bloodstream, which gives me time to think. That's the cool thing here, is that Selina Kyle, and what we're gonna see over the course of this, she doesn't value money. She doesn't value the acquisition of wealth. That historically speaking, in virtually any form of media at any point in time, video games, movies, different eras of DC's publishing comic book history, that Selina Kyle has been shown as this kind of Robin Hood type character, right? Robbing from the rich or give to the poor, or she steals for the love of the game or the thrill of possibly getting caught or something along those lines. Her motivations have always shifted. What this comic is going to establish is that her motivation is stability. Right now, that may come by wealth, but the reality is that's her ultimate goal, is having a life where every day feels normal, at least on some level, predictable, right? Because remember, that's the nature of the absolute universe. You got two kinds of people, those down in the mud who are struggling day in and day out, and those who are up in the sky who have the easiest life imaginable. And the people who are struggling are always looking to the sky and hoping that one day they can be up there too. And so Selina very much has that ingrained in all of her actions. And so looking down at this woman, Selina just says, Jonesy, initiate scan. So here's the other cool thing about Selina, right? The way that we think about Batman and all the gadgets that he has in his bat suit and all that kind of stuff, as we know in the absolute universe, Bruce Wayne's broke. Dude's a construction worker, barely making by, right? He does not have the billions of dollars at his disposal. Catwoman does. Right, this is one of the coolest things. She's got all the gadgets and all the tech, and she's got an AI built into her suit. And so that's where Jonesy says, no fingerprints, no ID, heart rate is about 55 beats per minute, but all other vitals are stable. And so that's where it chimes in and says, alert, additional intruders detected. And so at that point, they start firing off at her, and they just say, tell us where it is. And that's the funny thing, is Selina asked the question, right? Were you just itching for a big score here in my apartment? And when she starts getting shot at, she says, no, it's something more. 4 more women dressed like an old memory, like my old crew, the Calicos. You are here to make a point. Time for me to make my own. Now, I love the idea that Catwoman had a group that she worked with in the past called the Calicos. And as soon as I saw this, I was like, okay, so are we gonna get absolute Gotham City sirens? I mean, obviously you can't do it with Poison Ivy. I mean, she's all kinds of screwed up right now in the absolute universe. But for those of you guys who don't know what that is, Gotham City Sirens was actually a team-up book between Harley Quinn, Catwoman, and Poison Ivy. It was amazing. I loved that comic. It was incredible. That and DC Bombshells were fantastic, but I digress, right? As soon as these women show up here, Selina's just like, okay, let's do this. And like, she gets to work crushing every single one of these girls. It's like they never had a chance. And she says, see, you can trash this place, steal anything you want, go on. None of it matters. The only thing in here I care about, an old postcard worth less than a penny, and you will never find it, because for you, it's just a costume. The rope is a whip. The ears are theater. For me, it's tactical, head to toe, segmented Kevlar, a prehensile conductive carbon steel tail that responds to hand-free neurosignals. My helmet's left ear is a portable EMP generator. The right ear, is my little secret. So we don't find out what it is, right? And honestly, I'm kind of mad at Che Grayson for not telling us. It kind of makes me upset because I really want to know what it is. But she says, at first, you think you're running because you finally saw your situation, because the Calicos bail out. But then Catwoman hears the ticking of a bomb, and she's like, nope, I smell the Semtex, and then I realize that you're running because I didn't see my situation. And they blow the joint to pieces. And she says, this is the part where you'd make a joke about cats having 9 lives. What I'm doing is imagining how I'm going to break every bone in your body as payback. And P.S., happy birthday to me. And so at that point, we switch over to earlier in the morning before this attack from the Calicos, trying to break into her place. And a guy named Dante Calderon calls Catwoman up, or calls up Selina Kyle, right? And just asks her, right? So how does 25 feel, Miss Kyle? And she's like, undercaffeinated, which is exactly how I feel first thing in the morning. And he says, my sympathies, right? Will you be coming by the villa this week? And she's like, I don't know, it depends. How close are you? And he says, well ahead of schedule. We can arrange a walkthrough at your earliest convenience. What day this week works? And she says, today, right? I can be there in a few hours. See you soon, Dante. And so it seems like she kind of shifts around from location to location. And so this is so cool because this is the kind of life Bruce Wayne has in the main DC universe, but Selina has it instead. And so she walks over to this elevator, conducts a retinal scan, and then descends down into this shaft, which is basically the cat cave. It's the Bat Cave, right? It's called the Cat Cave, but it's the Bat Cave, right? And God, I love this so much. And that's the crazy thing about the Absolute Universe. Everyone is making it and everybody's succeeding and living their best life, except for Bruce. He's the only one who's broke, right? And it kind of sucks because she says this place is like a museum now. The exoskeleton, the camo suits, the Wildcat, it hurts to see a sheet draped over something so beautifully engineered. I never even got to use it, but I didn't get in this game for the thrill. Retiring at 25 means getting out while I'm ahead. So all this stuff, it served its purpose, and now I'm done. There's no looking back. So she's finally got what she was looking for with this stability. And it's dope to see because at that point, you switch over to the villa that she's been looking at in Sicily. And when she arrives there by helicopter, I might add, right? So just literally bawling out, that Dante shows up and says, welcome home, Miss Kyle. I trust your trip was comfortable. And she says, it's good to see you, Dante, but let's skip to the tour. And so he says, of course, although I must say, I wish you would consider our discussion of support staff. A property of this size and complexity has extremely demanding upkeep considerations. Would you like to talk about that? And she says, thank you, Dante, but no. And as discussed, once you leave this place, he confirms that he'll never speak of it again. And so she just says, now this is what I've been most excited to see. And he says, your very own piazza. Stunning, no? And for her, it's the life that she's been looking for. This one moment here is what she's been striving for this entire time. Now, the other cool thing about this place is Dante points off right over by this tree and says, yeah, so there is what looks to be a panther over there, and says it's the only caveat. We've tried to remove it. A couple of guys have basically been eaten in the process. So we could hire a professional to get rid of it if you want to. And Selina just says no, it just wants to be left alone. So again, it's this incredibly beautiful moment here. And so what you end up doing is picking back up in London, because at this point she's now moving on from this old life that she has. But it's like the Godfather 3, right? Every time I try to get out, they pull me back in, because when she's in here, she says, if I was any other 25-year-old, I would put my last night in London to good use. I would get absolutely drunk, go to a nightclub, not looking for Mr. Right, but I'll take Mr. Right now, bring him home, right? And just see where the night takes us. But then I wouldn't be me. But the crazy thing is that in the midst of this, she hears a creak, grabs a knife, and then throws it, which lands right smack dab in the middle of a cake, only for her to realize Holly is back. Now, this is an awesome exchange, and truth to tell, this is where things get amazing, because at that point, she looks at her and says, it's been 7 years. How did you bypass my security system? And Holly just says, I mean, you taught me every trick in the book. remember? Now, this is an important distinction. Historically speaking, whenever the character of Holly was introduced into DC Comics, usually by way of the idea that Selina was a prostitute, Holly was a prostitute and was taken under the wing of Selina, and then eventually they escaped and Selina taught her everything she knew, that the reality here is that it follows that same form and function here. So it is cool to see that the history between the two of them remains intact. Of course, the whole prostitution side isn't really a part of it, but it is still pretty awesome, because at that point in hearing this, Selina's just kind of like, right, and I regret that now clearly, right? I should not have taught you how to burgle and break into pretty much any place. But Holly's just kind of like, I mean, you're making that face that you make when you're pissed off. Have some cake. Red velvet, still your favorite, right? And Selina's just kind of like, I don't even know how you found me in the first place, but you have 5 seconds to tell me why the hell you're actually here. So now we're getting into the realm of bad blood. Something's happened between the two of them that led to things going south. Because when Holly approaches her and says, I'm sensing a lot of tension, Sour Patch, that Selina says, we're not teenagers anymore. You don't get to call me that. And so there's this kind of like back and forth. And that's where Selina asked Holly, quit the games, right? Calling me Sour Patch and all this kind of stuff. What are you hiding? And she lifts up a corner of her eye and her eye is bruised again. And she's like, some things just never change, do they? So what it seems like here is, given Holly's history of abusive behavior, that she seems to always track down or always end up in abusive situations. Oftentimes, that's a twisted perception of what love is meant to be. By whatever manner and whatever means, at a very young age, individuals' perception of affection and love is basically broken, right? They start to interpret negative behavior, negative actions, abusive behavior as a display of love. So when they come across someone that treats them well, then suddenly it feels wrong. There's something off. This is not what relationships are supposed to be like. And so they end up going back to abusive situations. The mind is a really weird thing. Does it make sense? No, not by any standard of measurement, but it doesn't change the fact that some people in the world function that way as a result of their circumstances. And Holly is in that boat. Getting them to see that circumstance and helping them to escape without them going back to it, that's the difficult part. That's the hard part, especially if it's a person you care about, right? But because of all the stuff that's going on and the fact that Selina's picked up pretty quickly on the fact that Holly is here for a reason, Holly just tells her, okay, fine, right? There's a job, and I see you already rolling your eyes, but I can't do this job alone. And Selina tells her, and I only work alone now, Holly, like you know that, and you know why. And so Holly kind of fills in the gaps to a degree. We don't fully get the story, but she just says what happened back then was screwed up. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about it, but we were a team, not just you and me, Selina, all of us, and you just left. It's like you didn't even care. And Selina responds and says, I cared a little too much, and I paid the price for it. And so Holly just says, I'm sorry, but this is the last time I will ever ask you for a favor. And Selina just asks, haven't I sacrificed enough, Holly? And Holly tries to pull the guilt card and actually succeeds, right? She says, yeah, you're right. It looks like your life is really rough here in your luxury apartment. Silly me. Happy birthday, Selina, and just walks away, handing the cake over. Now, it's enough to guilt trip her, right? Because historically, Selina has always been an empathetic person. She doesn't look like it, right? She looks like she's a bit of a dick. She looks like she'll leave you to your fate. And honestly, depending on what kind of person you are, she probably would, right? Truth to tell, right? But if it's one of these things where she has to choose between herself and someone else, and that other someone else is a person she has history with, she'll probably choose the other person, and she'll probably choose to go and help. Selina Kyle is nothing if not a character with a very complicated moral compass in comics. It's one of the greatest aspects of her character, truth to tell. And so as Holly goes to leave, Selina asks, right, can you still get out of whatever this is? Are you going to be safe? And Holly just says, don't lose any sleep over me, Selina. You know I always land on my feet. And so as she goes to leave, Selina just kind of talks to herself and says, Holly always did like the puns, just like she loved the costumes and the thrill of it all. That's why things with the Calicos blew up. She never believed that we could get caught until it all came crashing down. The postcard that I was telling you about earlier, it had a message written on the back, our heart, signed by 10 tiny names that I could barely read. My mother, my father, siblings, siblings, cousins? I will never know for sure. And so when Selina goes to cut into the cake, she realizes there's something inside, this little sphere, right? There's this little tiny orb. And she says, I waited years to hear from any of them, a visit, a call, another postcard, anything. Eventually I realized they were never coming. I was on my own. That picture on the front of the woman on the edge of the cliff still means something to me, but those tiny, tiny names felt like tiny broken promises, so I scratched them out. And that brings us back to when she was in the apartment, when the other Calicos showed up and that whole firefight started, which brings us back to her jumping out of the apartment building and almost dying. Because she says, I'm falling at terminal velocity with my gear damaged in the explosion. Now, I don't know if she would be falling at terminal velocity, and there's two reasons for that. The first is that, as you guys know, gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared, meaning that when you fall out of something, gravity is pulling you down at 9.8 meters per second squared. But you also have air in the atmosphere, and that creates friction. So that means that a person would never actually reach 9.8 meters per second squared. Instead, you would probably reach about 120 miles per hour, I think is terminal velocity for human beings falling through the air. And that's why I say I don't know that she would be reaching that speed, because as she's falling, she calls out to Jonesy and says, deploy carbon fiber net when we pass 300 feet. And the Jonesy AI, it tells her we've already passed 300 feet. She's like, then deploy, man. And so when she hits the ground, Jonesy analyzes her biometrics and tells her that she's got a dislocated shoulder and a broken ankle. Now, let me tell you something, man. If you hit the ground at over 100 miles per hour, there's gonna be a lot more damage than a dislocated shoulder and a broken ankle. They're probably gonna have to scrape you off the ground. Or at the very least, you're gonna have so many broken bones, you're not gonna be able to get up. But then again, this is comics, so who cares about the logic of it all? Let's have fun, man. So when she gets up, she looks over and she sees that the Calicos are taken off on their bikes. And she says, the copycats destroyed my penthouse, and with it, whatever plans I had for a fresh start. So I guess I will get to use the Wildcat after all, at least one last time. She comes racing out on this thing, and I gotta say, man, this is one of the most dope motorcycles I think I have ever seen. Because she says, Jonesy, find them. And so at that point, the Jonesy AI locates them in all that traffic and says, 7 potential assailants detected. And she's like, 7? There were 5 in my apartment. How deep does this crew roll? And it scans again and it says, number 7 identified as Holly Robinson. And she's like, so the one that's got her tied to the back of the bike, that's gotta be the leader. And what follows here, guys, is incredible, because as this race goes through, the leader ends up causing a pileup, hoping that it's gonna throw off Selina Kyle. It doesn't. At the same time, Selina Kyle launches the bike into apex mode, which literally gives the bike the ability to jump over barriers, which is how she gets past the pileup in the first place. And that is amazing. Of course, once it's past the pileup, it goes back into bike mode again, and then we're right back off to the races. And so she says, something I realized soon after arriving in the States, in those first orphanage stints, when someone sees something matters to you, they want to take it from you. When that happens, you learn one of two things. You can either teach yourself to care less or hit back twice as hard. And so she finally races up to where Holly is and says, I've got you, right? And just reaches out for Holly, only for the leader to 180 her bike and then to literally start racing in reverse as Selina is chasing after her. And this is incredible because Selina's just like, my God, she is good. Right? Like, if she wants to fight on a balance beam going 100 miles an hour, I'm game. And so she's just like, give me back my friend. And this leader with the sword is holding their own against Selina Kyle every step of the way. And even Selina says, I am not used to fighting this hard. Even when I make a move too suicidal for her to anticipate, she blocks it without making a sound. Who the hell is this lady? Because she's bobbing and weaving through every shot and every strike gets blocked. And Selina says, Waylon taught me street fighting, UFC moves, boxing, but I studied on my own too. A grab bag of styles so I'd be unpredictable. Sambo, Muay Thai, Judo, Capoeira, Taekwondo, but she's keeping pace, blow for blow. There's only one thing left to do. Shift focus. And so in this moment, the leader gets the upper hand on Selina. And Selina says, truth be told, there is a third thing you can do when someone comes for what you care about. You can care less, you can fight, or you can get good at stealing it back, which is exactly what she did. She ended up stealing the orb, but Holly is still stuck with the leader. And so once the leader gets back to their base of operations, Holly just says, if you're gonna kill me, at least do it where I can see the stars or something. Be humane about it, right? And that's where she just kind of gets tied up. And Holly's just like, not too tight. But the whole time, this leader says nothing. They don't say a single thing, but they get a phone call. And the call is accepted. And that's when this person on the other line says, you did an excellent job tonight. We are very proud of you, Cassandra Cain. Because Cassandra is getting a one-shot absolute comic. And I'm gonna tell you guys right now, anybody who doesn't know who Cassandra Cain is from the Batman mythos, I'll tell you in this moment, she is one of the deadliest fighters in the entirety of the DC universe. That girl is incredible. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like. I told you, man, Grayson nailed it with this comic. I can't wait to see where she goes from here. But I will catch you all later. Peace.